All right, welcome. So I'm Dr. Matt Angove here, and today we're talking about how we can raise ferritin levels safely. And if you have any questions, concerns, comments, man, please put them in here, and I'm happy to answer them so that we can. I've been dealing with this probably about. I've been practice for about 16 years now, and it really came about really looking into and diving into iron. What is the deal here? Why are people, especially ladies, having low iron levels, not getting results? Came out of a story I'll tell you about my wife. Whenever it's family, it becomes a big deal, and you really go to the next level to figure out, okay, what is the deal, and then out of that, being able to help my wife out and getting her on board with me, and thinking, wow, okay, maybe my husband doesn't know what he's talking about. Made all the difference in the world. So, yes, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, please put them out there. And this is my first time ever using a PowerPoint while doing a presentation like this. Usually I just go for it. So if I mess up, not to worry, we'll figure it out. So why does it even matter to raise ferritin levels? That's often people go and get a CBC done, complete blood count, be told it's fine, you're fine, carry on with life, even though they're depressed, maybe they're really lethargic, headaches, joint pains, performance is down in their athletic endeavors, heart rate rises, crazy every time they walk up and down the stairs, just not performing. And it's like, what is the deal? I know this is not me. There's no ways, maybe they're eating good food, trying to get regular exercise, getting sleep, nothing's changing. The thyroid looks good, hormones look fine, but yet we haven't gotten down the road or actually checking a ferritin level. And ferritin is a protein that essentially stores iron for later use. It's a little storage depot, because we can't just have iron floating around there in the bloodstream on its own. It is a very oxidative agent, which is why I often, and over the last now 6 years, about 6 years ago, I gave my last iron infusion. Because of new ways we've found to raise iron levels without having to get iron infusions. So thankfully, it's been 6 years, or a little over 6 years, since we actually had to give actually 7 years, because my twins are 7. So a little over 7 years since we gave our last iron infusion. So yeah, if you want energy to thrive, you don't want to just be surviving, get your ferritin level checked, because a ferritin itself is going to tell you consistently where your iron levels are. It's a very stable marker in the blood, and outside of acute infection or chronic inflammatory issues, or major raging obesity, metabolic syndrome, those can all cause ferritin levels to be elevated. If you have chronic inflammation or autoimmune conditions, or if you are obese, blood sugar issues, I've seen that raise ferritin levels as well. Or you're like, just got sick. A patient the other day, I was like, hey, what's the deal? Your ferritin is like 450. And it wasn't that way, the last time we checked it, it was about 120. And lo and behold, she'd actually had a pretty significant infection that was festering. And so once that is taken care of, her ferritin levels will come right back down. But the body does not want iron just floating around out there by itself, because if it lets it float around out there by itself, viral entities, pathogens are going to use that iron to support their livelihood, and we don't want that. So it is invaluable to ask for ferritin levels checked when you're going into your doctor. No matter how many times they tell you your CBC is good, you're good to go, it's not iron, just say, can we just do a ferritin check? A ferritin, I believe, is like $7.50 right now, cash price for a ferritin level. So we can all do that. In line with that, there's a few other lab tests I would look at, because just a ferritin, like I said, say you're acutely sick, or you're chronically have a other immune inflammatory related illness going on behind the scenes, it definitely could be that your ferritin is falsely elevated, or it could be even sometimes with hemochromatosis, the ferritin will be low, but yet you'll see iron saturation and serum iron through the roof, and total iron binding capacity, it's like less than 200. It's like, okay, maybe there's something else going on here. We don't want to just bludgeon this person with iron just because their ferritin level is on the lower end. So there are definitely nuances, but definitely, so getting your ferritin level checked, getting the total iron binding capacity, that's what that TIBC stands for. So, and in total iron binding capacity, the higher it goes, if it's up over 400, 380 plus, then the chances are you are insufficient in iron. And then, so your ferritin might be, 100, but if your total iron binding capacity is 400, then that is that your body's saying, hey, no, that ferritin is elevated, not because we have a lot of iron on board, but because there's some kind of chronic inflammatory issue or infectious agent present that we need to take care of. And then getting your iron saturation done, which, I just see this often. People have, even like cancer patients will have iron saturation, 6 or 7 or 8, because of the therapies they're undergoing that are producing a lot of inflammation in their body, and their ferritin looks normal, and they're suffering with crazy fatigue, and their iron saturation is extremely low. And those people actually need iron. That they're missing it. They need some iron, but that ferritin is falsely elevated from the inflammatory load on the body from either the cancer or to the treatments they're undergoing. And then CBC is valuable. The complete blood count. We want to see what the hemoglobin and hematocrit are. The red blood cell counts and then the size of the red blood cells, because that can tell us a lot about what type of anemia this potentially is. Is it related to B12? Is it related to folate? Is it related to iron more likely? Because usually there are some people that this doesn't always happen this way because they have so many nutrient deficiencies, but usually the CBC or the size of the red blood cells will be smaller. The MCV, MCH will be smaller when you're iron deficient, and it will tend to be really big if you are B12 or folate deficient. So one's called macrocytic anemia, there are others called megaloblastic or big cell anemia. And then an HSCRP, so this is a marker of inflammatory activity in the body, systemic inflammation. So I always check this because the HSCRP, if your ferritin is, say 100, but you have all these symptoms of iron deficiency, and then you check the HSCRP and it's 10 or 20 or 50. It's like, okay, well, there's a bunch of inflammation going on in the body, so that ferritin level is not accurate related to iron. So one, you need to check the other levels. Same with seroplasmin. Seroplasmin also can be a marker of inflammation in the body when it's really high, and so we need to check those levels and make sure we get those in line. And then we can look at ferritin and say, okay, this is where the person really is related to iron. It's like all the time. I see it where the ferritin level, once we get the inflammation down, the ferritin all of a sudden drops way down. Next thing you know, oh my goodness, the person's ferritin's 10. Like they've been iron deficient this whole time, and a huge part of their picture was low iron, but we couldn't see it clearly because of the inflammatory load that they were under. And there's, so many chronic infections that people deal with these days, and just, insane stressors and, standard American living as far as dietary, not goodness, we're very defunct when it comes to nourishing our beings, which can lead to, chronic inflammatory load and chronic low-grade inflammation. All right. And then copper. So copper is a integral part of iron metabolism. And I know there's people out there that promote as, copper is the answer to everything. There's no nutrient, there's no mineral, there's no vitamin that's the answer to everything. We need balance. Balance is the key. So you don't want to bludgeon yourself with copper, you're gonna end up with issues. You don't want to bludgeon yourself with iron, you're gonna end up with issues. You don't want to bludgeon yourself with calcium, you're gonna end up with issues. We want balance. And balance will create a human that is crushing it in life. All right. So how are we going to maximize iron absorption? Now, we do talk, and I have endless videos on this about, foods and coffee and tea and milk and calcium and all these things, eggs potentially, all interacting with iron and making it more challenging for the body to absorb iron. And this is, dairy is especially important for little kids to consider because, there are some children, babies, toddlers who drink milk, dairy, and get microbleeding from it in their intestines, and that leads to just tons of blood loss of iron loss, and then iron deficient anemic. And so you have to be careful, like how, maybe we shouldn't be giving them dairy. Most kids, they're fine, and then other kids drink so much milk that literally it binds that the calcium and casein bind all their iron up, and they're deficient, nutritionally deficient in iron because of the sheer volume of milk coming in. And in those cases, usually we keep kids to less than 16 ounces of whole milk a day. But how much does it truly matter related to your food? I'll talk about my wife's story in a second, and just kind of the miracle there of her iron deficiency journey. But when she was taking iron, she would take it sometimes with the coffee in the morning, and I mean, you'll see, her iron levels went up fantastically. But I have other people, they take it with coffee. It's like nothing happens. We stop the coffee with the iron, and all of a sudden their levels go up. So coffee, the caffeinic acids and the in green tea, black tea, you don't want to drink those around your iron. I would give it a minimum 2 hours away from. If you can do 4 hours, better. But same thing with yogurt, kefir, cheese, cow's milk, goat's milk, all those calcium supplements. I would try to give it a minimum 2 hours, if not 4 hours away from iron, especially if you are really deficient and you want, have a lot of symptoms, a lot of the fatigue, the heart racing, chest pressure, maybe you're all the way to anemia. You're not just iron deficient, you're to anemia. You really want to make sure you give yourself the time away from those agents, because you want to get back to, these are real symptoms. This is your body really crying out for help. We want to make sure we get it back to a state of normalcy and optimization as efficiently as possible. And then, hepcidin is a big player when it comes to iron absorption. And, for some it's a problem, it's too high. For some it's too low. And that's also a problem because they get way too much iron. But the thing that I consider mostly is that if you take a bunch of iron, which there are people out there promote massive dosing of iron, which I do not, you can get where the hepcidin is elevated, and it just kind of stays elevated because of the iron you're consuming. Because you're consuming not in food form, but in supplemental form. You get about 60 milligrams of elemental iron a day. Your hepcidin is just like always gonna be elevated. And so as with each dose increase, your capacity to absorb iron is actually going down. So you're taking more iron and you're absorbing less iron as a percentage. Which in those cases, that's where people, dose every other day, some studies on that. But in my opinion, it's like, we don't even have to mess with all that. We're taking gobs of iron. Hepcidin is going through the roof because the body's like, we got too much. That's causing all kinds of oxidation. That's, changing bacteria in the gut. That's causing more intestinal permeability. There's nothing nice about it. Because iron in the wrong form is definitely a challenge for the body. And there's a reason the body has these very specific stop gaps in place. Because it knows if it lets too much through too quickly, we're going to have problems. We're going to have a lot of imbalances, we're going to have a lot of oxidation, and we're going to feed a lot of pathogens. So it is invaluable to take what you need when you need it for as long as you need it, and then carry on with life. And then another thing is when it comes to iron timing and looking at hepcidin, exercise tends to increase hepcidin. So you don't want to take your iron supplement like right after a workout. Not a good idea, because up to like 4 hours afterwards, your hepcidin will be elevated, and the body's like, no, we're not letting more iron in at that point. So if you're a runner or you have your exercise routine, CrossFit or what have you, I would take your iron, in the hours before, or first thing in the morning, especially if you don't have any kind of medications, your thyroid medication or something you're taking in the morning, then try to get the iron in first thing. If your stomach is extra touchy, then eat some fruit, eat some meat with the iron to support the juices in the gastrointestinal tract, so that there's no irritation, no nausea, no discomfort related to take iron. And then and then just the type of iron definitely makes a big difference. So if you're an athlete, make sure you're taking it not after your workouts. Otherwise, you're really decreasing the effectiveness of your iron uptake. And for those ladies with currently having menstrual cycles, if you take iron during a menstrual cycle, there is an increase. They're suggested upwards of 2 to 3 times increase in iron uptake during menses. So countless women that I have as patients, I'll have them, especially once they get their levels normalized and they're feeling good, we'll just, okay, take a capsule, 4 days, 5 days, 7 days, depending on how long their periods are. Just take it during that time frame, and we'll maintain really, really well versus having to take it, day in and day out, until they're going to menopause. And then, it really is, like I was saying, that the kind of iron does make a huge difference. And so this is my wife. She was pregnant with twins. This is 7 years ago, 7 years and 2 months ago. And we wanted to have these babies at home. We'd already had our last 2 children at home, great experience. And we wanted to have the twins at home because, we definitely practice a lot more natural methods. And we want to give our children just, the best opportunity to survive and thrive. And we could not have the twins at home because, the midwife needed a level, I believe it was like 15 is what she was wanting, a ferritin of 15 nanograms per milliliter or higher to have the babies at home. And my wife was at 14, then she was at 10, and then she was at 9, which is her lowest level. And this was all while taking, different forms of iron bisglycinate. There's a lot of different name brands out there, but they're all basically the same thing. This iron bisglycinate is supposed to be, the best stuff from a natural non-heme form iron. And, nothing was happening. Her levels just kept getting lower. And we got to 90 milligrams a day. And it's like, okay, it went from 10 to 9, and she's feeling headaches and fatigue. And like, I can't do this anymore. And it was 3rd trimester. And, it's getting closer and closer and closer, like 35 weeks now. And then we started on, through just literally a miracle of God, and getting in contact with some scientists and friends that I didn't know knew things in the world of biochemistry. We were able to get a hold of this basically particular type of iron that was essentially housed in a rice protein matrix, and along with the zinc and molybdenum and a little bit of copper. And we started taking it, she started taking it 2 a day, and we did for 31 days at least when we got the iron levels checked. And, her levels went from 9 during that time frame to 23. She wasn't getting nausea anymore. She wasn't having headaches anymore. She didn't have black stools anymore. And that was all just from, changing up the iron formula. And not to mention, she went from taking, like 90 milligrams of iron bisglycinate a day, elemental, all the way down to taking 30 total milligrams of elemental iron in, the formula Blood Vitality, which is the one we created and brought to the world, to the pregnant women everywhere. And it is, it's just crazy to think about. Sometimes we think more and more and more and more is better, but in reality, what is better is balance. And the body needs balance across the whole plane. And so getting her levels up, with just 30 milligrams of elemental iron a day, a lot of people say, no way. It's like, no, it happens all the time. I got, endless people we've done this with. And it's all about the balance. And then, this is a fairly recent story. You can look online. There's endless reviews, but these are actual patients of mine. This is a mom, and she came to me. I'd seen her for, a number of years, I actually hadn't seen her for like 4 years, so I'd seen her children. She hadn't actually been a patient. She was a patient, but then she hadn't been, just brought her children in. And previously her iron levels were on the low side, but she's kind of like, threw it off. She was generally feeling kind of okay. But then she came in, this is about 8 months ago now, and she was complaining of heart issues and just like, shortness of breath all the time. She went to a football game, and her husband basically had to carry her out of there because she just felt like, I can't walk. Just a lot of numbness, tingling. Knowing like, man, is there something wrong with my heart? There must be something wrong, palpitations. And she wasn't able to work anymore. She goes all over the place with her kiddos as well. Definitely like kind of super mom style. And it was this, perimenopause. She's early 40s. Maybe that's that time for me. That's what's going on. And so, we set her up for a cardiology referral. Of course, we got, full blood panel done with her that day. And in my mind, I thought, you know what? I bet she's iron deficient. I bet you she is really, really down there. And, lo and behold, her labs here, if you can see this, came back as a hemoglobin of 9.5, hematocrit of 32. Her MCV was 77. So super iron deficient. actual anemic. And her ferritin was also just in the toilet. Yeah, ferritin was 4. So ferritin of 4, you're not going to do well with ferritin of 4. That's going to cause all kinds of issues, and that's definitely going to shut you down, which it had done for her. And so as soon as I got the labs back, got her on, she started actually taking 3 capsules of the blood vitality a day. And we got her checked again about 5 weeks later. And her, within that time frame on 3 a day, her hemoglobin had come up to 10. Her hematocrit was now 32.5. Her MCV was at 80, and her ferritin was at 16. And so in this short amount of time, things were, which a lot of people say, well, you should just give her an iron infusion, which, yeah, I mean, you can if you want to, but it's kind of amazing when you give when you're watching the person, you're making sure they're not in any kind of literally acute, like they need to be in an ER kind of situation, but you're giving them support. Quickly they'll see, like, her within 2 weeks, all of her heart symptoms were gone, all of her shortness of breath was gone. And it's like, at ferritin of 16, you would think, oh yeah, I mean, that's still low, right? Which we're still working on with her, slowly getting her levels up. The last one she was at 32, but all of her symptoms are gone. She's completely back. She's taking her kids to all their sporting events. She's back working out. She's back working full time. She owns a business. Everything's back on board, and she now knows she's not going to perimenopause yet, and she was literally nutritionally deficient, and that is what caused her entire symptom picture there. So it is so valuable, like I said at the beginning, to get your ferritin level checked, to get your iron saturation, get your TIBC, along with that CBC, the inflammatory markers, the hsCRP. Make sure you get those all checked. Don't just go, oh, man, I'm having these. I feel it in my heart, so it must be my heart, or I feel it in my legs, so it must be my legs, or I feel it, in my emotions, so it must be my hormones. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's actually your iron is lacking, and we got to get that baby up. And we need to, we need to support it, because say you're a woman and you're having really heavy, intense menstrual cycles. Well, sure, we need to get your iron levels up, but how are we going to get it so you don't keep losing blood nonstop? We need to work on the hormone balance, right? So that, and the cytokines that are causing all this blood loss with each period. So it's not just, we don't want to just basically use something to solve a symptom. We want to use something to, create an entire, root cause, get at the root, clear it out, get it so that I am now, like this woman with the heart issues, she's like a healthy, vibrant 44-year-old woman, good to go, loving life and feeling like, vacation's awesome. Football, awesome. Track season, awesome with the kids. Swimming, awesome. And everything's worked great because she feels awesome again. But all we did was, simply get her iron levels back up to normal. And then once that's taken care of, we're out of the emergency state. Then we can start working on the whole hormonal picture so that she's not losing so much blood each month with her period. All right. So in both of these cases, between my wife with the twins and being iron deficient, and this mom who was, anemic with heart issues, in both cases, literally we use a simple blood vitality. My wife used and would end up being, 30 milligrams elemental iron via blood vitality, which is 2 capsules. And this lady, woman with the heart issues, she used 3 blood vitality for 4 weeks or 5 weeks before we got the latest blood test done. And everything was back, moving in the right direction, and symptomatically, she was free, back to life. And that's 30 milligrams for my wife and 45 total milligrams of elemental iron for this lady. This is what I'm talking about. Physiological doses, you can make a big, big difference if you're, creating the balance there versus just bludgeoning your body with iron. So if you have any questions, looks like this is what we got in here. Thank you for doing this video. I recently encountered your videos and I have hope. I've not been feeling well. All right. For you, 2003. Yeah. Stay after it. Let us know if any questions or concerns pop up. I literally answer, you see my YouTube videos. I'm the one who answers every single one of those. I've probably answered, I'm sure, over 10,000 questions on there or replied. So if you have little thoughts on there, I can't diagnose and treat you on there, but little things to move you forward, I'm happy to do that. And then, yeah, if you are iron deficient, you're looking to get your levels where they need to be, or you have friends or family, you can send any of them this BV Live code, and that gives you 50% off the first bottle of Blood Vitality. But it really has been, I used every iron you can think of as a naturopathic doctor for the first basically 8 years of practice. And then my last 7.5 years of practice, I've used literally this Blood Vitality as my go-to over and over again, and have just, chart after chart of crazy results, from CrossFit athletes to runners to, even, 80-year-old women who were greatly iron deficient, and so many of them who had just crazy side effects from their different, iron supplements, and thinking there's no way, this can help me out, because I've over and over, I've had, so many issues with iron. But this can make a difference like no other I've seen. So with that, this will be the end, and I'll be here. Actually, I got 2 minutes. So if you have any thoughts or anything you wanted to mention, feel free, and I will be happy to. Can you discuss a little of food should be? Yeah. So the foods. It is true. Yeah. So if you're vegan and vegetarian, the chance of you being iron deficient, anemic is multiple times higher. And there's a reason, because you're not getting iron in a form, in the whole food form, that's easily receivable and accessible for the body. What's interesting, you talk about like a piece of red meat, which is an excellent source for iron, because red meat has both heme iron and non-heme iron. And the balance of those makes all the difference when it comes to absorbing and uptaking sufficient iron. Whereas if you eat like spinach, or say kale, or some other green vegetable or beans that's high in iron, sure, it is high in iron when you talk from a volume standpoint, but it is not high in absorbable usable iron, and you will end up deficient. Every once in a while, I do come across a vegan or vegetarian who is able to maintain. I do have this one gentleman whose levels have slowly maintained after decades of being basically vegetarian, but he will eat meat once a week. So I think that's making a difference for him, having just a little bit of red meat once a week. But he didn't spend his life losing his iron, on a monthly basis like many women do. So yeah, it is invaluable to make sure you're getting red meat, as long as you don't have any sensitive allergies to it. And then there really isn't anything that's from bison to buffalo, anything that isn't or that is a dark meat is going to have some level of iron in it. But yeah, generally the red meats, like from beef, grass-fed beef, 100% grass-fed, that's what we like around here. It is ideal. Why didn't the iron bisglycinate work for your wife? Yeah, I would say, in my experience with patients, I would say probably like maybe 25-30% of the time, iron bisglycinate worked. It's versus like ferrous sulfate, I would use iron bisglycinate. Ferrous sulfate, which is the standard like prescribed iron, means just atrocious. People have just so many. It's like I would say 100% of patients that I've seen who are on ferrous sulfate were having gastrointestinal issues related to taking it. Whereas iron bisglycinate, I would say probably about 70% of those have had issues taking it. And yeah, I think for whatever reason, iron bisglycinate, it's just an iron hooked onto 2 glycine amino acids. And though that is a very unstable molecule, so it hits the stomach, the free iron, the iron basically ends up breaking off. Some of it does from the glycine chelate, and that is very irritating. Free iron is. Whereas, like in Blood Vitality, that type of iron is housed within a protein matrix. So there's tons of bonds to the iron to hold it within that side, that rice protein, because rice, a protein structure is not like a flat structure. It's a 3-dimensional structure. So it's almost like you think about it's kind of hard to to show you here, but it's like, having a building versus a piece of paper. It's like, no, it's not just stuck on the outside of a piece of paper. It's actually hidden with inside that building. And that building is perfectly created for the body to digest, and for the intestines to be able to pull that iron out and receive it. Denise says, I've been taking 2 capsules of blood vitality for 2 months, checked ferritin 2 weeks ago, and it went from 9 to 19. Any tips for keeping it rising? Age 58, postmenopausal, recently diagnosed with Hashimoto's and hair loss is a disheartening issue. Yeah, I mean, that's super tough. I mean, generally, to get rid of the hair loss, you got to get your ferritin levels up to around 70. I've even had some, this one woman, this school teacher, we had to get her up to almost 120. And then all of a sudden, the hair loss completely stopped and everything went back to normal, and that can be super daunting to consider. However, if you are in that postmenopausal state, one, you do have, potentially a little bit of aging atrophy of the gastrointestinal lining. If, the hormones have dropped and you're having any other hormonal symptoms, hot flashes, night sweats, that kind of thing. So that would be something to consider to help yourself out, is to make sure, estrogens, testosterones, those are in good balance, because you need to keep refurbishing our being to maximize absorption potential. And estrogens and testosterone are definitely very strong anti-inflammatory agents for us. And so as a woman, when you go through menopause, and potentially, estrogen for sure is going to drop massively. But testosterone can, it could still stay up around 40, 45. That would be completely normal. It doesn't have to drop. But for many women, it does. And you find, oh my goodness, their testosterone's, 5 or 6 or 7. It's like, yeah, that's going to be challenging for them to, live their best life. And that kind of, definitely even affect iron absorption and utilization. But yeah, I would really try with your blood vitality, try to, keep it away from, the coffee. If you end up on, thyroid medication related to Hashimoto's, keep those away from each other, at least 4 hours away for sure, to make sure that the thyroid hormone works at its best. And, Hashimoto's is an autoimmune condition, right? So you got to think about the totality of your being. Well, how am I, doing with stress management? How am I doing with my sleep routine? Am I, mouth breathing at night or not? Or am I nasal breathing? You want to nasal breathe. And then, what's my physical exertion like? What, am I eating, a real whole foods dietary routine, which is like, meat and eggs and fruit and vegetables. And, sometimes even some vegetables are challenging for some patients. I've taken patients on vegetables for a season and seen, great increases in iron levels, because for some reason, the fibrousness, the cellulose was actually an irritant to them. But it can go, yeah, Denise, stay after it and keep us posted. If you're in one of our, the Low Ferritin Freedom Facebook group or YouTube, or you can send us emails. Love to hear how things work out for you. My expectation is, you keep you're 19 now. Another 2 months, you'll probably, upper 30s, low 40s, and it'll just keep titrating up for you. And you should see, okay, where because the hair loss, is it from the hormones, low estrogen, the menopause? Is it from the Hashimoto's, also could cause hair loss, or is it from the iron? So you kind of want to help all those out, right? And you just need to find a local, functional medicine doc that can support you in that, because that would be a huge deal for you. All right, folks, man, I hope you guys all get to experience your iron levels normalized, optimized, and regain back your life energy and vigor. It is, it's the craziest thing. I never would have thought that iron would be such a big deal for me when I first started in practice. But once you start seeing some patients using, like, they feel like might as well just call it good on life. And then, a month later, 2 months later, they're just like, oh my, I can do anything now. And all it was getting their iron levels from a place of deficiency to a place of sufficiency. That was all it was. It's like, wow, okay. And lo and behold, there's 2 billion people on planet Earth that are iron deficient. It's like, man, I think we should Maha movement, make America healthy again. Potentially, iron should be a big part of that. All right, talk to you guys later. Oh, sorry. Okay, we'll ask one more. You spoke about high ferritin for athletes, but athletes take very iron, and you against that? Yeah. So, many athletes have low ferritin. especially if they're runners and stuff, and even like I've had some CrossFit athletes with really low ferritin levels that are even males. But I was saying, related to athletes, if you're going to take iron, do not take the iron after your athletic endeavor, because the hepcidin will be elevated, and you will get hardly any absorption. You're much better off taking it, either 6 hours later after your athletic endeavor, or just 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours before your athletic endeavor, or in the morning kind of thing. So I would not take. You mean they have? Gotcha. You mean they have very, very, very high iron? Yeah. So I would not have an athlete take iron if they have really high, ferritin already, or really high iron levels. Which it's definitely high value to make sure, like I said at the beginning, that the total iron binding capacity, the iron saturation, and then that serum iron and the ferritin. You're looking at all those and making a educated plan around that, rather than just saying the ferritin's high, or the serum iron's high, or the iron saturation's high or low. You want to look at that whole picture and then decide what you're going to do for the athlete. But yeah, I mean, I have had some rugby players who their ferritin's 120. It's like, they should be fine. But then they take specifically they've taken blood vitality, and like, man, this makes a big difference for me. And if you're taking, we're talking 15 milligrams of elemental iron in one capsule of blood vitality. So this is not like, say, if you take, most every iron starts around 28 milligrams per capsule. And so this is a generally physiological dose if you're taking a single capsule, say, for like athletic endeavors. But yeah, if their ferritin's high, I'm not giving somebody iron, because that's not their problem. That they need, either one, reduce inflammation, or potentially reduce their iron levels, or look at copper, or vitamin A, or vitamin D, or some of these other B12, folate, some of these other nutrients, and see what they might be missing as to why their ferritin is in excess, especially if they seem like, as a whole, they're a healthy athlete. You're welcome, Denise. All right, I do have to end the stream now.